China has replaced its promised formula of one country, two systems with one country, one system.
Donald Trump revokes Hong Kong's special trading status with America after Beijing imposes national security laws on the city.
Hong Kong SAR is part of China. We are one country, and without one country, there isn't any basis to talk about two systems.
Government rejects U.S. reasoning to revoke Hong Kong's special status. And reports of a new locally transmitted case of COVID-19 as 3 more imported cases are confirmed today.
Good evening and welcome to TVB News. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will begin taking steps to revoke Hong Kong's special trade status with America and will sanction Chinese officials responsible for eroding the city's autonomy.
The announcement comes in response to Beijing's moves this week to tighten its grip on the city through a controversial new security law passed by China's parliament. During an afternoon event in the Rose Garden, Trump didn't take questions, and this time he stuck to the script.
The Chinese government's move against Hong Kong is the latest in a series of measures that are diminishing the city's long-standing and very proud status. This is a tragedy for the people of Hong Kong, the people of China, and indeed the people of the world.
Earlier in the week, the U.S. Secretary of State notified Congress that the SAR could no longer be considered autonomous from the mainland. As a result, the White House says Hong Kong no longer deserves the preferential trade and commercial status it has enjoyed since 1997.
China has replaced its promised formula of one country, two systems with one country, one system. Therefore, I am directing my administration to begin the process of eliminating policy exemptions that give Hong Kong different and special treatment.
Trump says the move will affect a full range of agreements with Hong Kong, including an extradition treaty and export controls on dual-use technologies. He also said his administration will sanction mainland and Hong Kong officials involved in smothering Hong Kong's freedom.
Our actions will be strong. Our actions will be meaningful.
An earlier joint statement released by the U.S., Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom cited deep concern about the dramatic erosion of Hong Kong liberties and autonomy. The Foreign Ministry labeled the statement irresponsible remarks and accusations. Beijing has yet to spell out what sort of measures it will take in its promised resolute counterattack. In the meantime, more than 1,300 U.S. companies that operate in Hong Kong face big questions about the sudden unraveling of the special trade relationship. Well, meanwhile, the Justice Secretary is accusing Donald Trump of violating international law with the U.S. response to Beijing's national security laws proposed for Hong Kong.
Teresa Cheng is also denying accusations that the city has lost its autonomy from the mainland. Haley Joe reports.
That we are becoming one country, one system, and we've lost the autonomy. Now, that is completely false and wrong. Hong Kong SAR is part of China. We are one country, and without one country, there isn't any basis to talk about two systems.
The Justice Secretary hit back at U.S. President Donald Trump hours after he announced his plans to revoke Hong Kong's trading status.
U.S. passed their national securities laws, so can China. Any other state that tries to use coercion or whatever means with the view to interfere with the sovereign right of a state to pass their own national security law is arguably infringing on the principle of non-intervention under public international law, and that is not acceptable.
But Zhang asked the Justice Secretary or others from the government hasn't provided clarity on a series of legal issues raised by critics on whether the NPC's decision complies with the Basic Law. For example, Article 18 only allows laws relating to defense and foreign affairs, as well as other matters outside the limits of Hong Kong's autonomy to be listed in Annex 3. While Article 23 does not give Hong Kong exclusive authority over national security matters, it does indicate national security falls within its autonomy, and also details on how the national security laws proposed by Beijing will still protect the rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Basic Law.
And if we in Hong Kong has not been able to pass it, notwithstanding BL 23, central authorities taking these actions are not only legal, but necessary and needed.
Haley Zhou, TVB News.
The government is looking into setting up a separate division to cope with recruitment and training as China begins to roll out national security legislation for the city. The drafting of the national security legislation is about to begin. Secretary for Security John Lee today downplayed fears that this would take away powers long established in the city's courts. Lee ascertained that in any case, the law will not affect Hong Kong's judicial independence and the court's power of final adjudication. Still, he stressed any agents that will enact the legislation must abide by local laws. Lee added his bureau is studying whether a new department should be responsible for national security works. He said, if so, how much manpower do we need? What do we look for in these staff and how will they cooperate with the police force and other disciplinary forces? The security chief was also questioned on whether there will be taboos and restrictions in future for the press. Lee noted as long as the media are truthfully reporting the news with no intent to commit a crime, they are deemed legal. Earlier, the Minister of Public Security, Zhao Kezhi, said the National Police will fully guide and support the city's police force. Lee said mainland agents will simply offer views on the world's situation and terrorist activities, which does not breach the Basic Law. All of this came hours after Trump's pledge to sanction mainland and Hong Kong officials. Lee rejected Trump's remarks, saying any attempts to threaten SAR officials during these critical times shall not succeed, as he and his colleagues believe what they're doing is right.
Well, local pro-democracy activists are pledging to stand firm in their battle against Beijing's imposition of national security laws.
Among those promising a fight to the bitter end is media mogul Jimmy Lai. Pinky Wong reports.
There's no other way but to fight on. I'm 72 years old. If I can sacrifice for Hong Kong, I will do so. This is my home. What I have, this place gave me. I will fight on to the last day. It will be honor if I become a sacrifice. It will be my honor.
That emotional response from media tycoon and pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai, who spoke as U.S. President Trump made his decision on Hong Kong. Lai has been identified as possibly one of the main potential targets of the new national security law proposed by Beijing. The law will outlaw subversion, secession, terrorism, and foreign interference. Lai has been arrested twice this year on illegal assembly charges related to the anti-government protests last year. He said America has to take the lead in helping Hong Kong.
If the Americans support us very strongly, the other countries will follow through. Will follow. I think that's America has to take the lead, and I think President Trump is the most effective president to deal with China because there was never a president play such a hard ball with China.
Members of pro-democracy group Demosisto echoed that view. They emphasized gaining international support over the impact caused by Trump's move.
Instead of emphasizing some of the slightly negative impact to fellow Hong Kong citizens, I believe the embargo or sanction will target red capitals. President Xi Jinping must bear the largest responsibility for the sanction in Hong Kong, because without the legislation of the national security law, I don't believe the world or the global community need to spend time to, when they need to deal with the pandemic, at the same time they will still put effort to impose any kind of sanction mechanism. We also encourage more international alliance to stand with Hong Kong. Actions speak louder than words. Right on the international pressure, if we could stop the national security law, even though we have to face certain sanctions, I think a lot of Hong Kong people would recognize it as some cost that we have to pay.
Pinky Wong, TVB News.
Meanwhile, Beijing loyalists are pledging government support as the U.S. takes action on Hong Kong.
And despite the threat of sanctions, they say they're still confident about the city's economic future. Dong Yao-Nie has details.
Despite growing concerns about the impact on Hong Kong's economy as U.S. threatens to remove the city's special trading status, the pro-Beijing camp remains optimistic about the SAR's economic prospects. Today, lawmaker Jeffrey Lam from the Business and Professionals Alliance said the U.S. sanctions won't affect the Hong Kong dollar. Liberal Party leader Felix Chung also thinks the city won't suffer significant short-term impacts from the sanctions. Chung, who also chairs LegCo's panel on economic development, said the U.S. tariff rises have had a limited impact as the country is not Hong Kong's major export market. But he admits harder strikes may come if the U.S.-China trade deal is changed. The Heung Yi-ko, the city's rural body, also pledged its absolute support for Beijing's national security legislation. Chairman of the powerful group, Kenneth Lau, said U.S. sanctions could actually bring new investment opportunities to the city. He believes the measures will accelerate the internationalization of RMB and push foreign-listed companies to make secondary flotations in Hong Kong. Meanwhile, two pro-Beijing groups petitioned outside the U.S. consulate in Hong Kong today against the country's interference in China's international affairs. Dong Yao-Nie, TVB News.
In other news, sources say a 34-year-old woman with no recent travel history has reportedly come down with COVID-19. That could bring the city's tally to 1,083, with 3 new coronavirus infections imported to the city today. All 3 new COVID-19 patients returned from Pakistan on Thursday on flight QR818. Among the 83 passengers on board, 16 so far have tested positive for COVID-19. 2 of the new cases are a father and son, and the other is a son of a patient who was diagnosed yesterday. They're all asymptomatic. The city had been recording 0 infections locally for 15 days in a row. And still ahead on tonight's news.
He can breathe! He can breathe!
Violent protests escalate in America over the killing of George Floyd. Trump pulls the U.S. out of the WHO.
Welcome back to TVB News. The American police officer who is at the center of a storm over a black man who died in custody in Minneapolis has been charged with murder.
But outrage over what is seen to be continuing police brutality against African Americans in the U.S. is snowballing across the country. Leslie Tang has more.
He can breathe! He can breathe!
Buildings, cars, and streets in the U.S. city of Minneapolis have been up in flames as public anger boils over. Following days of rioting and looting, police officer Derek Chauvin has been arrested and charged with murder and manslaughter.
He has been charged with third-degree murder. We are in the process of continuing to review the evidence. There may be subsequent charges later.
The city has been rocked by rioting, arson, and looting, sparked by a viral video which shows the victim, George Floyd, who is black, being arrested and pinned to the ground by Chauvin, who is white. Chauvin kneels on his neck, despite Floyd saying he cannot breathe. Chauvin and 3 other officers at the scene were fired after the incident. Minnesota's governor has called in the National Guard to help deal with the ongoing crisis. But outrage is spreading, with thousands setting fires, looting, and leaving behind paths of destruction in cities across America. Protesters and police clashed in Los Angeles. Many are comparing the unrest to the Rodney King riots of 1992. Georgia's governor has declared a state of emergency. In the nation's capital, hundreds gathered near the White House, some calling for more than just charges against the officer. Presumptive U.S. presidential candidate Joe Biden said systemic racism was behind the killing.
We see it plainly that we're a country with an open wound, and none of us can turn away. None of us can be silent. None of us can any longer can we hear the words, "I can't breathe," and do nothing.
The Pentagon has reportedly ordered the Army to have soldiers on standby should they need to be deployed to Minneapolis. Leslie Tang, TVB News.
Well, the U.S. president has made it official. Donald Trump will withdraw funding from the World Health Organization, again accusing it of not providing enough important information about the novel coronavirus in its early days. Alan Bookner reports.
Trump has been expressing anger at the World Health Organization for weeks over what he's portrayed as an inadequate response to the initial outbreak.
Because they have failed to make the requested and greatly needed reforms, we will be today terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization and redirecting those funds to other worldwide and deserving urgent global public health needs.
Trump also took aim at China, again accusing it of covering up details and the severity of the outbreak that was first discovered in December in Wuhan.
China's cover-up of the Wuhan virus allowed the disease to spread all over the world, instigating a global pandemic that has cost more than 100,000 American lives and over 1 million lives worldwide. Chinese officials ignored their reporting obligations to the World Health Organization and pressured the World Health Organization to mislead the world.
The U.S. is the largest source of financial support for the WHO, and its exit is expected to significantly weaken the organization. House Democrats say the move needs congressional approval. Other critics have called it misguided, saying it will undermine the institution that is leading the vaccine development efforts and drug trials to address the COVID-19 outbreak. Alan Bookner, TVB News.
Back locally, authorities announced 2 new appointments to the government today. The Chief Executive's office made the announcement, noting Carrie Lam has accepted the recommendations of the appointment committee. Pro-establishment lawmaker Ho Kai-meng is appointed as the new Undersecretary for Labor and Welfare. Ho represented the labor sector in LegCo. DAB member Julian Ip is appointed to be the political assistant to the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. Both of them will assume office on June 1st. Community service groups in Hong Kong are sounding the alarm over poor drainage systems. They say subdivided flats are a ticking time bomb for a coronavirus outbreak. The Caritas Youth and Community Service says it has received over 130 applications for drainage assistance from subdivided homes. Dozens of the residents suffer from at least 2 drainage problems, including leakage, floor odors, and broken pipes, which expose them to higher risks of virus infection. The organization is urging landlords to fulfill their maintenance duties and called for policy changes.
Basic living standards should be taken into consideration in future policy regulating the tenancy of subdivided units.
And that is the news for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Good night.